Welcome to the sixth episode of the CNED Development Dialogues. To discuss the topic of harnessing the demographic dividend, we have with us Mr. Taufiq Zaman, CEO and founder of the Casper Foundation in Bangladesh, a not-for-profit venture that focuses on career development initiatives for the youth. Thanks for being here with us today, Taufiq.
Thank you, Aditi.
So when we talk about India or Bangladesh's demographic dividend, we're talking about the potential to tap into a large working age population for economic growth. Over 60% of both countries' population is between 15 to 59 years of age. And harnessing this demographic dividend is largely contingent upon making this group productive. So Taufiq, what is the young demographic in Bangladesh like today in terms of education levels and skilling, and which areas are particularly lacking today?
Thank you, Aditi. What you said is correct, that we have a very large population in Bangladesh, over 160 million people or so. And given us, I think, a median age of around 27 years, that's quite a young population. Now, what we need to focus on to make sure we have this demographic dividend is the focus on education as well as skill development of this young population. Now, over the years, what we have seen in Bangladesh, perhaps over the last decade or so, is a significant improvement in the number of youth who are enrolled in schools, right? So that is a very good number to see. And perhaps, if I can perhaps already come in with the lackings, and maybe many areas that we do need to look into are how are students maintaining attendance and how many students are passing. Those are some of the questions that do come up. It's not like we simply want to focus on one number. But looking forward, if we honestly look at the young generation who are starting to join the workforce, we do want to point out that there is quite a high youth unemployment rate. And a large reason for that is, in fact, the skills development among these youth. Me myself being connected and working with many people in various corporates and various other companies, they clearly have a concern over how well equipped the youth segment are to actually join the workforce.
So what exactly are the skill development initiatives or the employment opportunities that are lacking in these youths today? You mentioned that attendance in school is a problem that affects education and eventual skill development, but what areas would need to be developed further in order to create more employment and reduce this unemployment rate that you were talking about?
Right. So, we can look at the good numbers in terms of education and the rate of students enrolled, but perhaps going into how many pass and how many who have actually developed a certain skill set to be able to join the workforce, that is where a big question mark remains, right? Now, if we look at the initiatives that have been taken by various players, we know that this rise in the number of students in Bangladesh at the secondary level is primarily, I would have to admit that it is due to the government's push for development and overall development in the country. Right? If we, however, then shift our focus towards the tertiary level of education, if we look at students who are going to universities and beyond, we do see not only a fall in the number, but as well fall in the number of female students who end up attending universities. If we look at the overall, on the other end, once again, focusing on what the government has been focusing on, which is an overall development as well as a strong focus towards the IT sector, right? Overall IT literacy, overall IT skills development. Yes, the focus is right. The attention is being focused in the right direction, but how far we have actually come, that is still, once again, a big question mark because of numbers such as the youth unemployment rate.
Right. You mentioned the IT sector, and there is a push towards broadening that space. What are some of these initiatives that the government and private players and impact entrepreneurs like yourself are doing to expand the employment initiatives in this space?
Right. So yes, the government has made that promise for the younger generation to become much more well equipped with digital literacy as well as IT skill development. We hear the initiatives such as the government implementing thousands of IT labs in public institutions, right, such as schools. But once again, what we would want to look into is what has been the impact from such initiatives, right? Because all in all, I think what people really need to focus on is the impact and the numbers that we want to represent to truly represent a positive impact from such initiatives. Now, that might some might criticize those that are being done by the government, but at the same time, those that have been implemented by those impact entrepreneurs or maybe even certain private sectors. The main concern is how much more needs to be done now. Okay, it's not a matter of if it needs to be done, because there have been quite significant innovative ideas coming. Okay, a lot of such coming from the likes of the private sector and the impact entrepreneurs. But given such a massive population that we have, right? We're a small, tiny country, but with a lot of people, and we do need to invest a significant amount of resources behind such initiatives.
You mentioned what a large population it is and how difficult it is to sometimes implement these initiatives. What about the level of gender parity in terms of education levels and these skilling initiatives and digital literacy that you were speaking about? Have we reached parity, or is there a lot further to go for Bangladesh in particular?
So certain reports, such as the gender pay gap, stating that Bangladesh is doing well, but clearly we're not quite there. I want to bring into your attention that how we talked about our secondary level student participation going up over the past decade, but if you look at in contrast, the tertiary level, like I previously said, it's lower. But what's even more significant is there are far less female students who are participating and actually getting enrolled to universities. Okay, these are some concerns that we can see in the education system. Now, many people perhaps going into the certain of social stigmas that we see, right, in South Asia and maybe in Bangladesh, that many people think that, okay, yes, parents might not want a girl to continue their education or career with being more concerned about getting married. But given my research and the people I've conversed with, they in fact also like to point out the flip side, which is boys are also sort of discouraged so that they get into the workforce earlier, right? It's neither here nor there. It is end of the day not just a gender issue, but more of a socioeconomic issue, perhaps. But at the same time, I do want to point out that the apparel sector and the RMG sector, which has been one of the biggest strengths of our country, where it was primarily women who were working there, in the last couple of years, the number of women has actually decreased. And experts say the reason behind that is actually skill development, that these women are not being able to keep up with the demands of the job. And perhaps if you look on the other side of the spectrum, in more corporate jobs and etc., yes, it's still male dominated. So a lot needs to be worked on. Social stigma, social mindset may be a part of that question, but there needs to be more encouragement for girls and women to really push for their own education and career for the long run.
Right. You mentioned that reports like the gender pay gap show that Bangladesh is doing really well. Actually, even reports that show how much of the gender gap has been closed show that Bangladesh is doing very well in terms of political empowerment and education levels and workforce employment for women. So it clearly shows that Bangladesh is harnessing the female demographic dividend pretty well. So what is the impact entrepreneurship space like, especially what you are yourself working in? Has that helped in kind of creating the space to provide employment and skilling of these youth?
I think we're in the early days. We're still very early on in perhaps coming to a conclusion of how well it is working. It is not that it's not working well. It is perhaps a question of how well it is working. Now, if we consider the impact entrepreneurship space, perhaps to the layman, what they simply need to understand that it is a linkage between entrepreneurship and social innovation. And that is where impact entrepreneurship comes in. Perhaps someone like myself, and there are many other people who are working in this space, focusing on ventures that are focused on education, healthcare, transport, and etc. What was very interesting was recently someone actually told me that if you look at any entrepreneur in Bangladesh, they are in a way an impact entrepreneur because they do tend to have that linkage to the social concerns, okay, of the society and how a business can address those problems. Now, in this space, one thing I have personally seen, something I found very positive, is among the youth segment, more and more students and more youth are actually aspiring to become an impact entrepreneur themselves. What in the early days we saw as simply wanting to volunteer, but they're completely trying to now incorporate entrepreneurial aspects of being able to tackle social problems, which actually is impact entrepreneurship. And on another end, if we look at the current situation, the current ecosystem for both entrepreneurs and impact entrepreneurs, what we do need to do is actually put a lot more of our resources there, because if we see the current ecosystem in terms of the financing of such ventures, the right kind of development of both entrepreneurs and impact entrepreneurs, Bangladesh still has a long way to go.
Right. So is there enough, are there enough incentives and financial investment being put on skilling entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship skill development initiatives, which you mentioned could go a long way in developing employment for this workforce?
100%. The thing about skill development is if we look at the development of an individual at the very basic level, of course, it is the education related to their ethics, morality, the education they get in school. But what they need to realize is that what needs to go right on top of that is actually skills development. And simply skipping the next layer and jumping onto the workforce is not going to help a person, right? Perhaps there needs to be a shift in the mindset about learning in general. Now, when it comes to an organization like the one I'm a part of, Casper Foundation, where we primarily focus on personal and career development, and where we primarily try to do it through practical experience of the youth, we know that one single player like ourselves cannot really change the entire system. Okay, there are many other initiatives, many nonprofits, many social businesses, many impact entrepreneurs who are trying to focus on skill development. But there needs to be, first of all, an acceptance of the fact that learning does not stop for the youth, okay, and going into the latter years. Now, some of the few things that perhaps our organization focuses on, one thing that we have had to adjust to recently has to turn in our educational programs into online courses. That is something we had to do because of the pandemic. Many other organizations are trying to give a strong focus on learning. And students themselves need to realize that what they learn in the books is, of course, essential, is, of course, very important, but it needs to be then transferred over to practical experience. Lot more of the application of the knowledge, which can be sort of concluded that the students or the young talents coming out of universities are currently lacking.
You mentioned that a lot of these initiatives have now gone onto the online field. Do you think Bangladesh in particular is ready to take so much of its education and skilling initiatives online, and whether people are digitally literate enough to handle this onslaught?
In terms of the overall infrastructure, in terms of the telecommunication and overall internet accessibility in our country, this is an area that, of course, needs to improve, and it will keep improving, regardless of where we end up being at one certain point in time. But in terms of the student themselves, it is very positive to see how early the youth of Bangladesh are adapting to technological change. On top of that, it is also I'm very positively surprised to see that so many schools of various levels in perhaps socioeconomic background who are actually already have started using online courses and conducting online courses, right? So in terms of the youth, I believe the youth are ready. Of course, the experience is drastically different. We are already starting to see where the lackings are in online learning. However, simultaneously, if the infrastructures are being worked on, if more and more teachers do get the training to properly use such online platforms, I do believe online learning is an option, whether it stands solely or whether it stands simultaneously with the regular school programs.
Thank you so much, Taufiq, for taking us through the challenges and potential that the youth of today face, and the importance of practical learning and skilling initiatives to create entrepreneurs themselves, so that this demographic dividend can be harnessed. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Aditi.